Good evening, everyone. This week, Between Two Priests has become Between Four Priests. But because of our topic this week, we thought it was good to bring in some others. Today, it's me, Father Joshua Nelson from St. David's in Elkhart, Pastor Terry Peterson from St. John the Evangelist in Elkhart, Mother Jen Fulton from St. John of the Cross in Bristol, and Pastor Dan Forehand from Grace Augustana Lutheran here in Elkhart as well. And the pandemic has highlighted a lot of different issues that we've been discussing: homelessness, hunger, different things like that. But it has also affected the clergy in ways that we never expected. We are all doing church in a completely different way and trying to reimagine and still stay connected to our people. And it's not something, I guess the phrase is always, they didn't teach us this in seminary, right? So a lot of that has to do with our mental self-care and different things like that. So I wanted to bring us all together to have that conversation. And this is for clergy, this is for the laity, and it's just something that we are all dealing with and all should be aware of. So I will open that up to the floor.
I'll start, just let you guys think for a few seconds here, but you know, on Facebook, I'm on different Facebook groups that are clergy, and one of my clergy friends posted today something about, 2020 is a bad year when, and he listed something ridiculous, like the best thing that's happened so far, the flowers in his front yard or something like that. And I thought, that's something that we've been struggling with, and trying to find what's the good news today? What's something I can point out and say, this is a really good thing today that's happened today, because I'm checking my emails, I'm checking Facebook, I'm looking at the news, I'm looking at coronavirus numbers every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And it's just, Ebola and squirrels out in the West, and murder hornets, and just all these things that are going on, and trying to find those things that we can point out and say, oh, God is present here. And in the past, for me, it's always been in a relationship, and we're redefining what it means to be in relationship. That here we are on Zoom, we're actually having a conversation that would have been done in person before. So where do we see God in this situation? So that's one of the things that I think we're struggling with as a group. I think probably everybody is.
Yeah, and I'm going to just openly steal from Nadia Boltz-Weber here, who reflected on the fact that clergy these days are working twice as hard to do things they're half as good at. And then I can't remember if she followed up with this or if I did in my head. So it may be her, it may be me, I don't know. But what I have joined with that in my head is that we're working twice as hard on things we're half as good at without any of the relational benefits, or fewer of the relational benefits, right? Yeah, so, and so that's just exhausting and discouraging and difficult, to work so hard on a Sunday worship experience that, as I was telling some folks before you came on, Father Joshua, Zoom just did not cooperate with me on Sunday, and so you work hard and then everything goes wrong. And you don't get to see your people in person, on top of that. That's really challenging.
Yeah. No immediate feedback. No.
Right.
Not even that cranky person telling me you were awful. None of that. That's
right.
Immediate.
Well, and I'm reflecting a lot these days on the fact that when I preach, I don't get to see people's eyes. And I never realized before how important that was, or to see their facial expressions. But I cut you off, Pastor Dan. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I think, you know, and then when you're doing something that you're half as good at as usual, it's harder, it takes a lot more effort. And so for me, I think one of the big things has been, I just haven't felt as worshipful in leading worship as I usually do. You know, the old way of being gathered together in a sanctuary with lots of beautiful faces and all that, you know, yes, I worked on my craft and such, but it was so natural that I was able to be in worship, and even as I let it, feel this sense of worship too. But now, you know, when a tech person's on vacation or something like that, I've, you know, this past Sunday had my computer and 2 iPads, one controlling sound, one controlling video, next to me as I'm trying to preach and lead worship and try to guess what's going on and make sure audio levels sound good and all that. And it's like, that's not worshipful for me. And so a lot of it has been, you know, I think for all of us, pastors, laity, the whole kit and caboodle, tending to our souls and taking care of that, and wanting to make sure that we're aware of, yes, we're called to serve others, but we are children of God too. And so how do we make sure in the midst of all this working super hard, extra hard, doing all these things, that we're taking care of ourselves, and for many of us, to our families too, knowing that just like everybody else, you know, is it worth it to go to the grocery store? Is it worth it to go to Lowe's to get pretty flowers, or should I just plant the weeds again this year and let that grow, because those grow better anyways? So, you know, how do you balance all of this? And so it's all these different parts of life that for all of us have been hard, but uniquely for us as clergy, I think for me, one of the biggest things has been this, I don't get to worship because it's all these different levers that I'm pulling.
I want to say 2 things off of that. One, to Dan and the weeds and the flowers. There's a wonderful line by one of the sisters in To Call the Midwife. And she says, "My dear, weeds are just flowers that we've decided are growing in the wrong place." So just take that with as you wish. But also, there isn't this feedback, and it's almost like we ourselves are trying to help people out of isolation, out of a sense of isolation, while we ourselves are really in that, because all of our meetings are like this, and when we do come in contact with somebody, it's 6 feet away or across the parking lot, or and that's difficult. It's difficult, especially when somebody that we know and we love, but is not necessarily part of our family, that we don't live with, wants to have contact with us, because this is how it was before. And you would just get a hug or handshake, and that is not the way anymore. And that, I know for me, raises my anxiety, and both the not being able to do it and the people attempting to do it, or you know, I don't see people, I don't go to the grocery store anymore. I order things online and have it put in the trunk. None of that is there.
Yeah, yesterday I had one of my favorite people from the community stop by, and was gonna help him out with a simple thing. And he's a close talker, you know, if you ever watch Seinfeld. And so I felt myself spending the whole conversation backing up. Like, we made it around my office in a circle because I kept stepping away, you know? And that just adds a whole nother level to the conversation, right? Because I really want to protect people. I see that as part of being a faithful person and taking care of creation. But this is a person that, you know, that's how they live their life. And so trying to stay connected, but not, you know, within 6 feet. So yeah, all those things, like you said, not worshipful, but it enters into everything that you're doing, right? So if you're leading worship, you're thinking nonstop about okay, if I'm going to have more than one person in the sanctuary, we're going to all wear masks to set an example, even if we're 10 feet apart. You know, if we're going to have sung music, it's going to be recorded so that no one's spitting on each other when they're singing. You know, just all these things. If I'm going to talk to somebody, I got to make sure that I put boundaries out so that they know, you know.
I mean, right now, for the sake of Wi-Fi, because it's much better at St. John's than it is at St. David's, Pastor Terry and I are in the same building, but so we're not wearing masks during this conversation. She's in one room and I'm in another. And that's because we care about each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's to protect each other.
Yeah.
You know, Dan, I want to circle back to what you just said, because you put so well something that I haven't been able to put into words. And that is the loss of worship for myself. I find every Sunday, as I'm saying morning prayer on Zoom, as I'm leading morning prayer on Zoom, there comes a point or two or 10 at which the people are responding. And of course, I can't hear them responding, but I know they are. And I think, Jen, pray the words. Don't say the words, pray them. And, you know, I remember thinking that when I was newly out of seminary and I was up at the altar and worrying about what to do with my hands and what page in my book, you know, and so forth. And another priest telling me, don't worry, it will come. You just need to get familiar with, you know, the dance of the liturgy before you can start really sinking yourself into the prayer. And I don't think I had fully processed the fact that was lost for me. So thank you, Pastor Dan, for putting that into words and for helping me realize something that I was really missing, that sense of worship, and how that just compounds all of the other stuff, right? Because I'm not being fed on Sunday morning. And so that makes the 6 feet and the social distancing and the lack of colleague contact and the lack of contact with parishioners and just everything, that makes it worse. So.
Yeah, and bad habits are easy to form and hard to break. And I've told a number of people, you know, if I had known in March that we would be here in late July with no end in sight, you know, I would have done a lot of things differently. And, you know, because back in March I said, oh, this will be, you know, a month, you know, Holy Week looks iffy. Okay, Holy Week's going to be out, but we'll do Holy Week a couple weeks later. It'll be fine. And it keeps going. And so, you know, had I known, I think that's another hard part, is just time is so strange with this. You know, I would have invested more in making sure that I was finding those places of worship. But after, you know, 2 or 3 months of not doing it, then it's like, oh, that's a bad habit. And so it becomes this thing that just is, you know, continues to fester and such, and it's hard to break. And so, yeah, I wish that I had known, and I'm trying, you know, to have a longer view now of things, even if it is scary to think about how long this may last, you know, because I can't remember who said this. It was in relation to Andy Stanley, the pastor of the big mega church down in Atlanta with 25, 30,000 people. They just said, you know, we're done. We're going to not worship until January. And we're just going to say that because if our focus, the focus of the church, the mission of the church is not Sunday morning worship. And yet so much of my time has felt like it's been making sure we have people be able to see Sunday morning worship. And I'm like, yeah, you know, if I knew that we were not going to be together again for 6 more months, I would totally change the ways that I act. And so I wonder if that's a piece too, to continue forward as I think about my own health and such, to be, you know, thinking about this in the long sense, as opposed to just making it through today.
Yeah, that sort of unknown, like if we made it known, like, okay, we know for sure we're not going to meet until this date. So stop asking, stop wondering, stop looking at the numbers. We're not going to start, we're not even going to think about it until December 30th. And then we'll let you know, right? that probably would change quite a bit. I think anxiety might go down in my household, but then I also might start focusing on, okay, how can I make this more worshipful for me? This is the norm now. This isn't temporary. This is it. So how do I make it not just a temporary fix?
All of our support systems and our go-to coping mechanisms as clergy have all gone, right? The daily office, yes, is great, but when you're doing it to get it out and online for everybody or something like that, that's where our focus is, and it's not this daily bread thing anymore. Our spiritual direction group, our clergy groups, which fortunately Pastor Terry and Dan and I are all in one, and we were able to gather online, but it was very different. The rest, the Sabbath aspect was not there anymore. I would often, when I found myself being parched and dry, and I heard a evangelical pastor say brilliantly, we are created from the dust of the earth, no wonder we're thirsty. And I would go up to St. Gregory's, up to the monastery in Three Rivers early and have Eucharist with them, and they're not taking anybody in right now. They're a truly cloistered community now. So that's not there. And this is part of why, when we realized that this was going to extend, I went back to Ohio and spent some time with my family there. There's my brother-in-law was killed in a tragic accident in August, and my sister had her firstborn son in December. And when this all started, she's moved back with my parents, but everybody's kind of juggling this new way of doing things. And she found out that I wasn't going to be able to meet in person with anybody, not able to go to hospitals. And she said, "Will you please come and help with the baby?" Yep, okay. So I did that for a little while, and then came back to Elkhart with plans to just kind of stay here and do everything from here. Had my regular doctor's appointment, which I've been dealing with. This is kind of going into more of what we were planning today, dealing with anxiety and struggling with depression, and was put on anti-anxiety meds back in October, and antidepressants. And this was the 6-month follow-up, kind of already on the schedule, met with the doctor, and after conversation, he said, both the doctor and the nurse said, if you're not meeting in person, maybe you should go back to Ohio. I think it might be better for your health. And I actually have that in writing from my doctor. And that's not, like, that doesn't happen for clergy, right? So I did that until beginning of July, when things got a little better at home, and we're all like, okay, masks are being put in place, there are mandates, and we kind of know what's going on, and able to manage it. But there's still those issues when the other support systems are no longer there.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that those clergy, and this is true for lay people as well, but clergy who struggle with depression or anxiety anyway, and I'm among those. I am on antidepressants and was before COVID became a thing. I mean, first of all, we need to be really careful to keep taking our meds, right? So, and to find other ways, as Dan said earlier, if he had known, going into this, he would have developed other ways of worshiping earlier, instead of letting bad habits form. not only do I not have lunch with colleagues, but my spiritual director's mother just died. She had COVID herself. And so I haven't had a spiritual direction appointment in I don't know how long. And that's no one's fault. You know, it just is what it is. But we need to find other ways to keep it going. And I'm still in the process of discovering what those are. And I'll probably just have it kind of sort of figured out, and then we'll have a vaccine, you know, and but that's good. That's part of the journey as well.
I think for clergy, you know, we're meeting in groups online. So I'm Lutheran, so I'm meeting with a Lutheran group in the morning, and then the next day the Episcopal group in the afternoon. But the Episcopal group has lay people in it, so it's not quite as free as the Lutheran clergy. But it is. We're all speaking more about the struggles we're having emotionally, mentally, physically in these meetings than we might have before, because we're isolated or we don't have that support group of a few close friends. So we're, you know, I'm finding out that a lot of my colleagues are struggling and they're dealing with it differently, you know, therapy and going to stay with a son or a daughter, just, you know, we're going to do it. This is a calculated risk I'm going to take. I'm going to go to my daughter's house for a month and do worship from there so that we're together. And, you know, but then for me, there's a little bit of guilt with that, right? Like I can take that calculated risk, go see my mom for a few days, but I'm not going to take a calculated risk and go and visit Aunt Susie in the nursing home here in Elkhart because it's not safe, right? So it creates this weird, you know, tension of what risks am I willing to take and what risks am I not willing to take?
Well, and for those of us that struggled with stuff before COVID hit, one of the coping mechanisms or distractions was to keep busy and do things. So, you know, I go and do things at the church, or I'm going and making visits, and you can fill up that time and fill up that space in your head. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was easy to do. It's, okay, I've got this new technology, and how do we do this? Now we're getting into this rhythm, and those distractions aren't there anymore either. So the bad parts of all this are able to creep in.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've been doing, or trying to counteract all that, is I feel these days more rooted to the earth and to creation.
Yeah.
So I am chronically undisciplined in my prayer life, and it's always been a problem. With COVID, I have tried really hard to become more disciplined. And one day, you know, I was sitting there struggling to say morning prayer by myself, you know, in my bedroom. And I looked out the window and thought, it's a beautiful day. Why aren't I saying morning prayer outside? And that sounds like such a simple thing. But for me, it was this revelation. Morning prayer is easier for me to say and to be worshipful and feel connected when I'm outside where it's green. Even if it's already bloody hot, you know, and humid outside, still there's greenery around me and birds are flying around. And I understand that is a mark of my own privilege. I have ready space or ready access to green space and to wildlife. But that has really fed my soul and made me feel connected to creation and thereby God, in ways that I don't when I'm saying morning prayer, you know, from my bedroom. So that has really helped. And my husband and myself and my kids have made a conscious effort to go for walks in the woods and along the St. Joe River, you know, and so forth, to seek that out rather than have it be a, well, the dog needs to, you know, do her business, so who's going to go walk her? To make that family time and time with nature in a way that we didn't before. And that's been, you know, as you said, Terry, a place where I can say, okay, I see God in this. I didn't get it in Sunday worship, but God was present in this, and that's good. So.
So one other way we've been, did I mention this already? I'm losing my mind. Is
That's the reason we're here.
Point those things out. So we've created a small group on Facebook of good news during COVID, and just posting, you know, something simple or something good. If we hear a good news story on the news, we post it. If we, you know, something happens good during the day, put that out there. So, you know, I like when we first started, I was like, oh, I could just start listing things, and that was kind of cool. You know, like I got all these great things I can say. But then it also helps me just realize that it's not just, you know, all the end of the world. It's, you know, the Lord is present. You know, like I'm spending a ton more time with my children than I did before. And funnily enough, my youngest son has become very political in this time, and he's watching all of these videos. And so he'll hear something that seems logical to him that I disagree with, right? So we'll be playing a game or something, and then we'll have this really intense conversation. He's almost 15, I'll be 15 Thursday. This intense conversation about whatever in politics. And when we're done later on in the day, my husband will say, well, I was listening to you guys, you know, like we would have never had that conversation before, you know, because he'd be off with his friends, or he'd be at, you know, soccer practice all the time or whatever. So that's a huge blessing. I don't know, Dan, you've got little ones. Is it a blessing to be with them all the time?
Yeah, no, I have a 5-month-old and a 2-year-old, and they, yeah, I mean, though again, it kind of, as you know, not to go negative again here, but the as hard as balance of life was pre-COVID, for, you know, to know like, okay, I'm in work mode now, I'm in home mode now. There's none of that. It's now just kind of, you know, all meshed together. And so, you know, so on my good days, I appreciate that and say what a gift it is that I can go from this council meeting to right outside the door is my 2-year-old ready to show me something. What a gift that is. On my bad days, I say, man, I feel like I'm failing as a father, a husband, and a pastor because the whole thing's messed up. So it is, it kind of bounces back and forth between the two. And so, yes. And so on the good days, it's really good and really great. On the harder days, yeah, I just kind of want to get away, and all that. So, but no, I can't imagine folks who have school-age children right now with all the stuff with schools going on and trying to think about that, you know, or folks who are married to teachers, and, you know, the whole school thing is all consuming then. You know, thankfully we don't have that. But yeah, for those who do, it's just a lot. And you know, one other thing I was thinking too was, you know, I think all of us as pastors, whether we admitted it or not, we knew that the day was coming when the church was going to fundamentally change, and likely it seemed was going to go to a digital presence as the primary place. I think most of us thought that was like 10 or 15 years down the road, maybe a little less in certain spots, but, you know, especially those of us who serve older congregations, thinking that was a little bit longer down the road. And so to kind of have that time frame, you know, suddenly constricted, both for ourselves and for our people, there wasn't room for grief and mourning. And as anybody with any mental health experience will say, like there has to be a place for grief and a place to mourn and a place to say, yeah, this is this is awful. Like this, we've been talking, Pastor Terry brought this up a number of months ago in a clergy group that I'm in, about the story of Ezra 3 and the temple is being rebuilt, and there's people who are laughing, filled with joy, and there's people who are weeping, and you can't tell the difference between the two. And it's like, there needs to be that space. And so I noticed that for myself and for the folks that I serve with. And I'm still trying to creatively find a way to make that space, even though it doesn't seem like we can even see the old foundation right now. It's all new.
Yeah, and on a good day, I can say, this is so exciting. We have been forced to reimagine church. And on a bad day, I say, this is awful. I can't deal with this anymore, or I am so discouraged. I think, go ahead.
It was a blessing most often, because if you think of like the Spanish flu, they didn't have any of this, right? They just were in their home.
Mm-hmm.
And they had their Bible maybe in their prayer book, maybe, and we have this huge blessing that we can still stay connected in some fashion. But kind of another weird thing that I'm wondering about is when we do start meeting in person again, it's not going to be the way it was. So I'm almost afraid of that space, because that's when I'm going to really mourn, when we come together, but we're not really together. I'll probably cry for weeks, because it's going to be hard. It's going to be like, oh, we were so grateful to be back together, but we couldn't fellowship. We couldn't pass the peace hand to hand,
Couldn't sing.
Or sing, right? Hopefully we'll be having communion in some form for that, so that at least we'll be getting that connection,
Well, I think it's also forced us to examine what is most important to us about church. And for years, I would say the Eucharist. And it's, oh, trust me, still very important. And having fasted from it now for however many months is absolutely awful. But I can also now see the ministry in our outreach as really being, and I think the prophets would say this is more important. I scoff at your sacrifices. I turn my nose up at your burnt offerings, because you're not doing this other stuff. And this has forced us to re-examine that. Right now, I'm waiting on an email from the principal at Mary Feaser School, so he and I can discuss how our backpack ministry is going to happen this year, because that's not really what's important. That's not really what is needed for our kids going into this new school year. So what is, and how can we reimagine and be this sign of good news, right, in the world, in this new world?
Yeah. So when I first filled in here at St. John's 12 years ago or so, someone asked me if I was glad to be back leading in a church, and I said I really had missed being in the pulpit, because I love to preach, I miss being in the pulpit. And that person responded to me, well, I always miss being at the table. And I for all these years have been using that as, when people ask me the difference between Episcopalians and Lutherans, I say, well, the practical part of it is that we both agree that the sacraments are important. We both agree that the word is important. And on all things being equal, Lutherans, the first of the equal is preaching. And for Episcopalians, the first of the equal is the Eucharist, right? So that was the difference, I would say. But then I heard that person say recently, we have to remember that we can get the whole body of Christ. We can get the good news in scripture, in preaching, in worship. and that we don't have to have Eucharist to be complete. And it took me aback. You know, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. But I still want it. And one thing I've been doing in my household, so we live in one county and I work in a different county. So that county I live in was doing better. And so churches opened. And the church that my in-laws go to has been open. So my husband and my children go there on Sunday morning because they were not worshiping online, let's just be honest. So they're going there. And the first Sunday they went, they're like, why aren't you going, Mom? And I said, well, we sort of agreed as a diocese that we're fasting from the Eucharist. And I'm not sure that it's fair that I go because my parishioners can't go. And so I do worship and watch worship and participate in worship on Sunday morning with my computer while my family drives to church. Or maybe by then I'm already taking my nap because it's later in the day than my services. So that just adds a whole nother weird dynamic into the whole thing. I don't know, there's just so many things. You know, that school thing is huge on my list because I have 2 boys in high school and a husband who teaches. So, and he's the head soccer coach and they're practicing. You know, it's like, you know, stress. So, but another thing I do, I just do this all the time to cope, is I watch funny videos. There's been so much creativity during this pandemic of people singing or dancing or creating these skits or whatever, that I spend a lot of time, and my kids are like, oh, Mom's watching videos again. We can hear her cackling out in the living room, you know. But I need to laugh. And so I do that.
To the worship aspect, it's still not the same, but there is this added benefit now that so many churches are doing online worship, and it's all at different times. And I've got friends, you know, all across the country and around the globe. So like we pre-record service on Saturday and then interactive service at 9 o'clock on Sunday. And then at 10:30, I can watch another service. And at 4, I can watch another service where friends of mine are preaching or worshiping. And this global, the church universal has become really visceral for me. It's right there, and I can see it and I can interact with it all around the world. And that is one of those blessings that has come out of this.
I love the videos of virtual choirs because it represents for me, I think, what you were talking about there, Father Joshua, that we could not at St. John of the Cross ever do a piece of music with as much, I don't even know the word I'm looking for, transcendence, you know, as what I see from all of these people singing and playing and so forth in their own homes, and then that all being put together. And so the virtual worship, the virtual choir videos just take me to a place not only of that musical transcendence, but also of that sense of the body of Christ, you know, the worldwide universal church, the communion of saints, and how we're bigger than this virus, and how we can produce something that we couldn't do if things were the old way, you know, if we were all in our own churches, you know, singing our own stuff.
We hadn't even thought of it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate that into worship here at St. John's, because, you know, we don't really have a choir either anymore. And how do I use those videos in worship once we're back in the building? We we have a very traditional sanctuary. So we don't have screens, it's never gonna happen. But how can I bring those choirs? Can I make it just like a visiting choir? Today, we're gonna hear this choir. You're visiting us from the world. Yeah, I want to, I really do. Yeah.
We had a very small wedding about a month ago, 10 people in the sanctuary, including the grooms and myself. And one of the things that upset the couple and myself the most was not being able to have music. They're very musical. I can't call myself musical, but I love music. And we do have a screen in our sanctuary, even though we're a fairly traditional church. That was something that, another priest did long ago. And so I said, well, what if we had musicians record music and, we just had it projected onto the screen? And so they had Bishop Doug, singing and playing All Are Welcome as their processional hymn. And they had a good friend of theirs singing a different hymn, and someone from our congregation, singing something different. And there was beauty in that was different, but didn't feel hollow, I think, the way we expected it to. It felt really worshipful and like we were a body of Christ, celebrating the union of these people in holy matrimony together.
So I look forward to 2 years from now, or 5 or 10 years from now, and looking back on this video that will forever be in somewhere in the interwebs, and wondering, how this has changed my health, my mental health, my spiritual health, my physical health, how different my the congregational health looks, all those different things. And so I think that's my greatest wondering and curiosity, is how will the Spirit use this, both practically and also just internally and within me to transform me. And so again, on my good days I'm excited, on my bad days I'm terrified about that, but we will see. So
let's make it a date. 5 years from now, we'll watch it.
5 years from now.
Because I'm ready to look back.
The question that I keep asking myself is, what is the story I want to tell? When I'm sitting with, hypothetical grandchildren, what is the story I want to be telling about this time? Do I want to be telling the story of how it all stunk, or do I want to be telling the story about how we were transformed and how the Spirit worked, in our midst? It's the latter I want to be telling. So how do I partner with the Spirit to make that the story?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of get the same stuff from my grandparents who went through the Great Depression. Like when we talk about it, it's not, oh, how awful it was, which it was, but they share the good things. Like the year that they had a bumper crop of potatoes and all the things that they could do with potatoes, and the discovery of peanut butter and onion sandwiches that many still love. I'm more partial to peanut butter and pickle, but the good things, there's good things that come out of bad times.
Yeah.
Are those are the things that we have to hold on to.
Yeah.
And those are the things that we will share. And if we don't, I don't think we'll survive.
And God is good no matter what.
Yeah. My daughter is being baptized on Sunday at our drive-in worship service. Yeah, and I was writing the liturgy this morning, and at the end said, as a sign of thanks for God's work, you're welcome to honk, to flash your lights, or whatever. And I'm like, what a strange and weird world this is, that's part of the liturgy. And so, it'll be on video. And so 10 years from now, and she's like, oh, I want to hear about my baptism. I'll say, well, look at this. This was
amazing.
This was something. and amazing. And so, right, there still are people being baptized. There still are people being ordained. That God is still raising the dead, and that's good news.
Mm. That seems like a good place to stop.
Yeah.
God is still raising the dead, and that is good news.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mother Jen, I wonder if you would close us out in prayer.
Absolutely. My friends, the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, you are the giver of all good gifts and the comfort of those who grieve and mourn. We mourn many things, Lord, and we are stressed about many things. And there are days when that is hard to cope with. We ask that you fill us with your grace and your strength on those days. And we ask also that you fill us with your Spirit in ways that help us to recognize the ways that you are in our midst still, the ways that you are good still. We give thanks for this gathering and this good conversation, which has filled me with new life and new hope. We ask that you be with our congregations and our families, filling them with new life and new hope. And bless your clergy throughout the world. While we do not struggle alone, our struggles are in some ways unique to our vocation. Help us to always see you in all that we do, to expand our minds to see opportunities for new ministry, and to know that at the end of the day, COVID does not get to win. You win. Love wins. Always. We pray for this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Now I'm crying. Thanks for that.
Thank you all.
Thank you.